Anyway, I'm very happy to be back here. Happy that you're all here. We may even have among us it could be, possibly, she could be our youngest member of the pilgrimage. We'll see, we'll hope and pray, maybe. I'm more concerned about taking somebody very old up there because it's harder, but somebody younger, often no problem, quite strong like that. So, see what happens. Thank you so much for coming. Just want to get some idea because this is actually the third segment of a course I've been teaching, but it's no problem if you have not been here. We're going to adapt it, and we can always do that. But I'm just curious, who here has roughly been at the first couple segments, got the first two segments of it? Just so I have an idea of, okay, so we're like a half-half, no worries. Welcome. So what I'm going to do is the course I've been rolling through, oh thank you, thanks very much, is called Buddhism in a Nutshell. It's from this, this is a book our organization published. And what happened is I was leaving for Nepal several years ago, being out of the country for a while, and the night before I left I got an email saying, could you record this course? We want you to teach a course like this called Buddhism in a Nutshell, based on a very precious prayer that they made copies of here, called The Foundation of All Good Qualities. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So there are no recording studios really of any quality in Nepal. And I said, I can't do it, I'm leaving. So I'm leaving tomorrow, there's no time. And I recommended a couple other teachers that they get, and do you have extras or okay? And
This is one and that's another one. This is free? Yes, that's free.
Great. And if you just have one set of each for me, and then I'll thank you very much. Thank you. So I managed to, believe it or not, record the course in Nepal. Some of it had to be re-recorded in India, but it's an 11-hour course. So if you are very new, I would recommend the back. This is the audio CD. It's also available online as an MP3, if that's easier for you, I think, to download through our organization. Again, I don't know what that costs. I know the book is like $20 or $25. So what they extracted into the book is very different than what's on the CD. The CD is more comprehensive, but the book is a really nice guide with Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe in it as well. So I just wanted to explain how this whole thing evolved. But it's a great overview if you're new to the path. Even if you're somewhat experienced, it gives you a great thing. And some people I know that want to know about Tibetan Buddhism in this tradition, often I'd hand them the book and be like, here, this will take care of it all. So I just wanted to explain. But tonight, as some people are newer, I will give a little bit of a review of some of the things that we've done and just a general overview of what we're doing in this tradition in Buddhism, like that, if that's okay for those that have been along. So one of the things we tend to do, thank you very much, one of the things we tend to do when we start a program or a course is we have some inspiring prayers that in a sense kind of get our minds well oiled so we can sit down. Instead of just sitting yourself down and launching out of the gate, I find it's better to prepare your mind a little bit. It's the same in meditation. You can't just sit down on a cushion and start meditating. You need to oil the machine, so to speak. Kind of get yourself ready, let go of the things of the day, like that. So let's first just sit comfortably. And basically any posture that you're feeling comfortable in your body. And great, perfectly fine to sit in a chair and just have your feet the way that you can have them like that, as long as they're not crossed, so the body's balanced. And just slowly allow yourself right now to settle into this posture, and you can lightly close your eyes if you like. And notice your breath. Allow your breath to deepen a little bit. And every time you exhale, release some distraction of your day. And just slowly bring yourself more here into the space. You may notice some areas of your body that are holding some tension. And just become aware of those. And with your breath, allow it to open up some space in the tension. And just releasing yourself into as comfortable position as possible. Let's have a look now at the posture of the mind. The posture of the mind. So just reflect for a moment on your purpose for being here right now. And often the purpose relates to our wanting some information about a certain path, a certain spirituality, some way it may help us to open our minds, open our hearts, so maybe we are less negatively reactive. That's great. And in this Buddhist tradition, this Tibetan Buddhist tradition, our focus, the real purpose of why we do anything or think anything or say anything is to reach a fully awakened state as a Buddha. Buddha, Sanskrit word for fully awakened being. And we want to reach that place, which sometimes is called full enlightenment, because then you are unlimited in how you can best serve and best help all living beings. You know exactly what to say to someone, what to think, how to respond every moment you breathe. You're omniscient, all-knowing, free of all fears, a perfect, pure, blissful being every moment. But the real purpose is to perfectly serve all living beings. Enlightenment is a means for doing that. So if you'd like to include in your motivation for this evening this idea of benefiting all living beings, feel free. And take a moment to set a positive motivation for this time together. So please relax and slowly open your eyes. So traditionally we also sometimes read some prayers, and the center has very nicely printed out the taking refuge, generating bodhicitta. These are some standard prayers. You're welcome to join in, you're under no obligation to do so. But this 4-line verse, I take refuge until I'm enlightened, this 4-line verse is our initial prayer we often say right before the teachings. And what we're acknowledging is, I take refuge, there's a little typo, until I'm enlightened is the word, until I'm enlightened, in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Let me explain Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. What is that? Some of you are familiar. The Buddha I just mentioned. So on one level, it's the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, we've heard about. 2,600 years ago he lived, an Indian prince. Why would I want to take refuge in him, and what does refuge mean? It means I need some protection from suffering. I'm looking for protection from more suffering. None of us like to suffer, okay? So what is it about the Buddha that would interest me? Is Buddha, again, is fully awakened being. So he explored suffering phenomenally, completely, because his intent was to bring about an end to the suffering. And he found a space of mind where he was beyond suffering. And then what he did is he taught us, he taught a path, 84,000 different discourses to help all kinds of different beings get there. And so basically I'm just giving information also according to that path. I'm not necessarily really interested in people being Buddhists, or we don't convert people or anything. It's more like I give information. What's useful I found on this path that I liked is you have to apply the information to your own life and your mind. If something works for you, great. If it doesn't work, put it to the side. Find something else. But does it make you happier? Does it bring you to some conclusions in yourself that will lead you to a place where you one day will be free of suffering? That's what I'm really interested in, is people being free of suffering, including myself. Okay? So the Buddha got to a place where he eliminated it completely from his mind. So is that a being that you might kind of seek advice, seek protection from? One level. So that's one level. The other part is he represents, on another level, the omniscient mind. The omniscient mind, all-knowing mind. Okay, so if somebody knows everything, personally I think that's quite cool, because a lot of times people come and ask me for advice. Do you think this is good? Can you help me with this? And my mind is limited. So I don't know what to say sometimes. And the Buddha, he knows what to say. So 2 weeks ago, I had the unfortunate thing in 1 week, I had 2 funerals to go to. One was a very close friend of our family, I've known for years, he was in his 70s. He had Parkinson's disease. He didn't die of Parkinson's. He just, one morning, his wife went upstairs to wake him and he didn't wake up. So he probably had a heart attack. And, but the second one was really, really painful. Really much more painful, was a 15-year-old suicide. So, what do you say? Right? There's nothing to say. And I went to the funeral, and I think there were about 1,000 people there. I think most of his class came. And the parents and the sister that was left, who's 14, I mean, utterly distraught. They will never be the same. And the grief in the room with that many people was so, it was too much, I have to say. The pain was so, it was just, you didn't know what to do, and everybody was crying. And when I left, it was in the morning, and I left, and then I noticed that I had other things to do during the day, and I noticed that I wasn't really functioning because of, you're distraught and you're depressed and then you're exhausted from the pain. So later I saw other members of my family, and then we went to the family's house another day, and I was there with them. But when I got to the family's house and other members of my family were talking, and all of us said the same, we all went off in different directions, and somebody said, that whole day I was completely exhausted, and it's from the grief and the pain. And so as a Buddha, as an enlightened being, you may walk into that space and know exactly how to handle it. And I've seen Lama Tsongkhapa Rinpoche, my teacher, this man in the center, I've seen him handle people's tremendous pain with incredible poise and ease and direction, like that. So wouldn't we like to be there? Wouldn't we like to be there, especially in the face of utter discomfort, right? So the omniscient mind is about that. So wouldn't we like to have that ourselves? Okay, so that's one thing we look at. Can I seek protection in that? The Dharma are the teachings, the philosophy. Ultimately, the philosophy that teaches us about the nature of reality. It's a very profound part of the philosophy, and it's something that really cuts out the root of your suffering. So for me, that would be something I'd want to take refuge in and seek as something that can really remove the core of my suffering. That interests me. The Supreme Assembly refers to the Sangha, capital S, and that refers to monks and nuns, people that have taken ordination, or it could be those that, on another level, those that have had a perception directly of the nature of reality. Supreme Sangha, Supreme Assembly. Okay. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, can I become a Buddha? And again, here's the purpose: to benefit transmigratory beings. What is transmigratory being? Is all living beings, and you could say sentient beings. It's all the same. Transmigratory means they're beings that cycle through samsara. What is samsara? Sanskrit word that means cycling. To turn. To turn. What are we turning through? Birth, old age, sickness, and death. And I'm sorry, but all of that sucks. Okay? So it doesn't mean there isn't some beauty in birth. It's a miracle, actually. I've also seen some very good deaths as well. Really incredibly peaceful, transcendent. Okay? And I think that was, if I can say, that was beautiful. There's really, okay, there is that in it, but there's a lot of suffering in those situations. I see my father with old age now. A number of my friends taking care of elderly parents. I see my own aging. And, some of us discuss and think like, this really sucks. This really isn't very fun, this procedure, okay. But you can have fun with it. So that's what transmigratory beings are. They're going through the cycle, transmigrating, moving through the cycle. Okay, so you can say sentient beings. What does that mean? It means beings with a consciousness. And sentient beings are the same as transmigratory beings. They're just synonyms. Transmigratory more refers to their cycling nature, and sentient refers more to that they have an unenlightened consciousness, like that. I sometimes say living beings. Okay. So if we'd like, you're welcome to join in. We're going to recite 3 times in English this refuge bodhicitta prayer. Bodhicitta is the enlightened attitude. Bodhi is enlightenment. Chitta, mind. the mind of enlightenment. What is the mind of enlightenment? I'm showing up with my mind to try to get myself to Buddhahood as quickly as I can so I can benefit all transmigratory beings. That's bodhicitta. It's all about others, not about myself first. Cherishing others more than myself. Okay, so feel free if you'd like to join in. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. So I'll just recite in the Tibetan phonetics one time so you can hear the chant. O Sangye Chodan Togi Chonam La Jan Chuba Dudag Ni Gyab Suchi Dagi Jiningi Peso Namgi Drola Penchu Sangye Drup Parjo. And then we offer a short mandala. Mandala is a world system. So this is representative of in ancient days when you wanted to get one teaching. It was incredibly precious. The advantage we have right now is teachings are going on all the time. You can go online and search in Miami Beach about Dharma centers, Buddhist centers, alternative centers. You can search on specific teachers, from very, very high lamas and great teachers to people like me. And you can see they cycle around, and there may be some in the Florida area that are coming this year. Like that, it's amazing. There's so many teachings around, people don't even know where to go. Where do they start, right? But in ancient days, it was very rare. So what you would do is you'd save for a long time, and you'd finally buy a precious jewel, and you'd manage to show up at one teaching, and you'd offer the most precious thing you could to get that teaching, because it was so precious. Okay, now we kind of go, yeah, had that teaching before, okay. You know, I'm busy on Tuesday, you know. I go, you know, that's what happens. So they call this, sorry to say, a Kali Yuga, a dark age. They call it a degenerative time right now. And it means that the Dharma is declining. Okay, now we've been through this before because Buddhism teaches reincarnation. Our minds have been many different forms in different realms. It's okay. Okay? We've been through this before, but right now it's a challenging time, and the planet we're living on seems to be challenged. Okay? The Dharma's challenged. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy and have a nice time and be happy. Okay? But just understanding that is what it means is the teachings will start to decline. So first it looks like there's a lot of teachings going on, but less people interested and harder to practice. Why? Because we have these little boxes called smartphones, and we have technology, and we have, you know, I teach a lot from my computer now. It's easier when I travel, but we are very distracted by these things and addicted to some of the stuff that goes on. So it's very hard to practice, to really still the mind, quiet the mind. I think it's more essential than ever to do that now, to really try. And they say that if you're very intent on practicing, it's a little bit like shooting through the eye of a needle, which we know is very, very, very small space, but you can actually advance more quickly for those that are really intent. So it's a very exciting time as well, like that. So the mandala is symbolic of bringing this offering to the teaching like that. So we sometimes put our hands in this configuration, which shows you a little world system. The ring fingers back to back are Mount Meru, the center of Buddhist cosmology, the center of the universe. Okay? These sections here, there's 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, are supposed to be the 4 continents that surround this mountain. Okay? We are the southern continent, Zambuling. Okay? And they say things like, I don't know how much I believe it, but Buddhist cosmology, the reason our sky is blue, this mountain is inverted with a flat top and 4 sides, goes down like a pyramid, inverted pyramid. Okay? So each side of the mountain is a different jewel. So the reason our sky is blue is we face the side of the mountain that is lapis lazuli in color. Okay? But in any event, I like to think about a beautiful world system that I would offer for teaching. But I also include, whether you can include jewels and gems and, beautiful food and nectar and gorgeous clothes and whatever, flowers and things like that, gardens. You can imagine that. I also love to offer the most beautiful scenery and sunsets I've ever seen, and all the love I have in my life, all the wonderful advantages I've had, and things like that. So you can just imagine a heap of that spreading out, filling all the space. And if you'd like, you can join me and we'll read this in English. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. And then there's a closing phrase, Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niratayami. And that means please accept, precious teacher, please accept this glorious mandala world system from me. Like that. So we might need to fix a little bit of our pages before our retreat, but anyway, that's great. So those are just a few, just to give you a taste of a few things we sometimes just traditionally read to set the tone for the teaching. Thank you so much. Thank you for preparing all that. And I'm just curious, how many of you don't know really much about the Buddha, anything about Buddhism, anything like that? Is there anybody here that's really, you walked in and you're, okay, great. Let me just give a little review of this Indian prince, 2,600 years ago lived. He was born actually in what is Western Nepal right now, Lumbini, and sometimes I lead another pilgrimage which takes care of the Indian and Nepal Buddhist sites where the Buddha actually lived, and it's very momentous because you're really, as we say, walking in the footsteps of the Buddha, and I love to lead people through those sites as well because they're very blessed. So he excelled at everything. He was quite an extraordinary being, and he was protected and shielded by his father because, very similar to Jesus' birth, when he was born, his father was visited by these seers, basically, these wise men, and they predicted and said, how wonderful this auspicious birth. Your son will either be the heir to your kingdom, but we also see another alternative for him, another opportunity. He will be a seeker. And that meant a spiritual mendicant and somebody who's on a spiritual path. So the father had no interest in him doing that. He wanted him to be the heir to the kingdom. And he shielded him, and the prince excelled in everything he did, married, had a child. And eventually the father thought he was good enough and okay enough and safe enough that he would fall into his footsteps. So he led him out of the palace grounds with some attendants, with his servants. They went out, and one day they saw 4 things, 4 different people. They saw an old person, a sick person, a dead person, and a spiritual mendicant. And the Buddha had never been exposed to these things before. So he was startled, and he asked the attendants with each one, what's the story here? Well, what is this? So each time the attendants explained, even though the Buddha's mother had died when he was young, he was raised, in a sense, by an aunt, and he didn't really experience the suffering of the mother's death, because I guess he was too young and didn't really know about that. So the attendants, the servants explained, and he was completely lost and shattered inside by this knowledge that people get old, people get sick, they die. Absolutely floored that this would happen, as the servants told him this would happen to his family, his loved ones, everybody in the palace, and it would happen to him. And he couldn't believe it, shattered to his core. So he just said to them, is there no solution to this? And they pointed to the spiritual mendicant, and they said, well, these are people, and in India they have a sadhu culture, which are these spiritual mendicants, sadhus. And usually they're men, and they're dressed in orange, and they basically live a very simple life. They're really authentic ones. They lead a very simple life. They wander and they sleep in very simple sadhu enclaves, and they're given by the culture, they're given often pilgrimage places to sleep for free that are often protected and safe. They're given simple food. And I love the Indian culture because you go into a shop, they're allowed to go into shops to beg, and they'll just like open the door of the shop and the person will see them, and they might have a begging bowl with them or not. But Indian merchants often, especially the small shops, right in their little cash drawer, they have some coins that are there specifically to give to beggars or the sadhus. So it's kind of part of the culture. Now, India is changing rapidly. So soon, I think the commercialization of India, the development, it's really nearly a developed country, particularly the South, they're going to lose some of that. And some of the Indians I speak to that I know, they'll say, yeah, they're losing some of that already. But it's that kind of culture. So he said, so this sadhu culture are people that are on a spiritual path to awaken themselves fully, to bring about an end to their own mental, physical suffering, and continue on their path, whether it's to full enlightenment or to some sort of transcendence, like that. So the Buddha saw that, and obviously from past lives that he had of doing some extraordinary deeds, he was already at a somewhat high level of realization. So it sparked something in him. It lit something up from, so like previous knowledge that was closer like that. And then what happened is he realized that he had to leave the palace grounds and become a spiritual mendicant to find an end to the suffering. He couldn't bear the suffering, so he would find an end to the suffering. So we're not talking about abandonment. Okay, some people say, well, he left his wife and kid, but his real premise was to find an end to the suffering for them, including everyone in the palace grounds and everyone on the planet. That was his motivation. So it's a very different motivation than just shirking responsibility. He felt this was his responsibility, because he thought, what's the point of living with them and being the king and reigning in this kingdom if all these people are going to end up getting old, getting sick, and dying? Like he couldn't bear it. So he thought, I have to just at least search and see if there is an end to the suffering. So off he went. Part of the pilgrimage I've led was the last time I led the pilgrimage of the Indian Buddhist sites. We went to the palace, where the palace used to be, Kapilavastu it's called. And it's on this border, western Nepal and the eastern plains, the poorest part of India. So we went, and they're uncovering, each time I've gone, they uncover more and more of the ruins of Kapilavastu, which was the palace. It's amazing. So you just see ruins of stone walls and things like that. But the last time I went, we were there, and they were in the middle of a dig, uncovering these artifacts. It was really cool. And the guide we had was an archaeologist, a great guy, he was a professor, and I forget how we teamed up with him, but he was very authentic. And he said, he pointed, and we're looking out over the plain, and then he said, and you see the little mound there? And we said, yeah. And he said, well, and there's kind of these pillars where we think they're pretty sure this is where the Buddha left the gate of the grounds, which I had never seen before. So I was like, oh, it's right here, that he left. And they said, and that little mound is where he left his horse, because he rode out, but then he left the horse, and the horse was supposed to go back to the palace, because he said, I'm going on foot, and the horse died of a broken heart, and they found remains of the horse's bones there on that mound. So that was how they pieced together, and the last time I was there, I just found that so cool, and we all got very sad about there. We had a moment of like, the horse died there after, we were all, it was really kind of a very poignant part of the pilgrimage when we all, we had a very luscious group this last pilgrimage, and so it's neat, you can see that. So basically he went off walking, and he met other people. He met other spiritual mendicants, and one of them was, he met basically these 5 other guys, basically, that were out there, and they would compare techniques. And the cool thing is, when you get on the Buddhist path, and some of you are already doing this because I know you and I've seen you at other things, so you become friends, and you have a Dharma career together, right? So what happens is you started around the same time, and maybe you met a teacher, and then you kind of started something where you live, and you started inviting people. And it was neat, and you got into this together. And I have a couple Dharma buddies from the late 80s, and we, met the Dharma around the same time, went off, and then we were in Asia for some time, did some retreats together, went off at that time and did other solo retreats. Some of us were at Laudo together, the place I'm leading this pilgrimage. We'd come back together and we would compare notes on how did you do that retreat and how did that work, and I got kind of stuck when I did this, like, make sure that you don't do this, this really kind of, this part of the meditation was hard, and make sure you have this when you go there, make sure. So we compared notes. So the Buddha was doing this with his friends, and they tried different practices. And what's cool for me when I'm in India is I have been around enclaves of sadhus, because I've gone to many spiritual places in India, which I'm more attracted to than the tourist sites. So I was walking around this holy mountain in South India, and there's a number of ashrams on the mountain, and trying to think of the name of the Tiruvannamalai. It's in the south. Tiruvannamalai is a holy place of Ramana. I'm going to get his name wrong. Maharshi or something. Ramana Maharshi, I think his name is. Hindu guru. So there's a lot of sadhus there. And I went around the mountain, which you can do in, I think, a few hours. It's very good to go around, apparently full moon or something. But anyway, it was daytime, and I went around the mountain myself. But you meet other people walking around, and at one point there's a bench, and I sat down to have a snack that I brought with me. And I sit down, and I didn't realize that across in this grove of trees was a sadhu colony. So as I'm sitting there, a few of them must have seen me, and they came out, and they're in their orange robes, and they come out and they sit down next to me, and some of them knew English, and they started asking me about my meditation techniques. So we would compare notes like this. What do you do, and do you study, and what do you study, and what are you learning? And it's really interesting for me to talk with another person on a deep spiritual path. What are they doing? And if I'm in India in a while, in an area, I've befriended some sadhus where over the course of being in a town for a month, we've met several times and talked about things, and it's nice that way. So the Buddha had his 5 friends. There were 6 of them. So they compared things, and at one point they got to a point when they thought that food was a distraction. So they thought if they didn't bother about food but basically subsisted on a rice grain a day, that was good enough, and it wouldn't disturb their meditation. So there are pictures of the Buddha's life, and you see the Buddha emaciated with the ribs sticking through like that. The fasting Buddha, I think they call it. So he was sitting by the river in this phase, and he, I think, had a little bit stalled in the meditation, or wasn't kind of getting, where he wanted to be. And he's sitting by the river, and a musician goes by in a canoe. The musician has an instrument, a long stringed instrument, and he's tuning the instrument and says, for the instrument to play perfectly, it can be tuned neither too loosely nor too tightly. And the Buddha was getting messages from everything at this point, I think at a high level of transcendence. And so he took the message from that was the luxuries of the palace was really not that helpful. The austerities of starvation was really another extreme, too tight, too loose. So he thought the middle way is really the way to proceed from that. And so at that moment, the rice maiden, Sujata, showed up, and she had the perfect bowl of rice porridge for him with all the nutrients, and she offered it to the Buddha, and he decided to accept and ate the rice porridge, which gave him just the sustenance he needed, just the energy he needed to walk to Bodh Gaya, which is not that far from Sujata, where you can visit the place where she gave him the rice porridge by the river. And then he went over and sat down under a Bodhi tree, which is a descendant from the ficus family of plants. And he sat down and he said, I'm not moving from the seat until I've removed the last vestiges that keep me obscured, the subtle obscurations to omniscience. And he sat there. So the last night when he sat down, and also at this time, the 5 friends, when he ate the rice porridge, criticized him and said, you've blown it. We're supposed to be eating 1 rice grain. Now you've eaten. You're not going to get the meditative level that you need. You're not going to be able to find an end to the suffering. So they kind of, nope. So he went over to the Bodhi tree, sat down, said, I'm not moving. And the last night of his before enlightenment, all the last Mars came, distractions, sex, and it was like a sex, drugs, and rock and roll night, right? They all came trying to distract him, and they said, why? Why do you think you should be enlightened? You know, who do you think you are? Okay. So the famous earth-touching mudra, he touches the moon cushion on which he's sitting, or they say earth-touching mudra, and he touches the earth to say, but the earth is my witness. The earth is my witness of all the lives I have spent making effort, all the lives I've spent over and over, giving up my body, serving others, trying, you know, in all these different lifetimes. You can read what's called the Jataka tales, and it's all the previous life stories of the Buddhas. The Jataka tales, all the things, you know, he was a rabbit and he leapt into a fire to help somebody who was starving. He was a tigress and he was starving, and in a previous life as a monk, he gave up, or as the son of one of the kings, he gave up his life for the starving tigress so she could eat and feed her cubs, because she was going to eat her cubs. Like all these lives like that he helped this, and he gave an eye to somebody because they couldn't see, and he gave his leg to somebody. So he said, because the earth is my witness of all the effort I've made. And at that moment, that was it. Last subtle obscurations removed, he became Buddha, fully awakened being. And then he spent 7 weeks in meditative absorption, because the conditions didn't come together for him to teach. And the five friends showed up, because they were kind of like, well, let's see how it's going over here. You know, like, let's see what happened for him now that he ate the rice porridge. And they noticed something extraordinary had happened. They could just tell that he was different. Something was, you know, incredibly transformed. And then they begged him for teaching. And finally, 7 weeks later, the conditions came together. And in a village called Sarnath, which is now a 5-hour train ride west of Bodh Gaya, outside the bustling city of Varanasi, he gave his first teaching to those 5 disciples. They became 5 disciples of him, his first disciples, and he gave a teaching on the 4 noble truths. That there is suffering, there's a cause to the suffering, there's an end of the suffering, and there's a path to the end of the suffering. It's very significant. So that was his whole thing, is he found an end. And then what he's been doing, what he did at the time, fortunately for us, was he taught how you get there for those that are interested. So over the years, Buddhism spread throughout Asia, because obviously that's where it was first located. So they got the first touch of it, fortunate for them, and it spread through all over India at the time, and it flourished in monasteries like Nalanda, and also in parts that are now in West India. There's beautiful caves called Ajanta and Ellora that you can visit, which were monasteries, thriving monasteries, and things like that I visited that were quite extraordinary. They're not, Ellora is not all Buddhist. It has some Hindu caves and Jain caves as well. And there were some really, Nalanda was a little bit like, at the time, which I'm going to say was thriving in like the 8th to 12th centuries, but from the 1st century as well. It was like Oxford University of Buddhism. And then things changed. And again, there was a changing time, and there was a Muslim insurrection, and then the conditions stopped, and then it disappeared in India, like that. But all over, Buddhism went to Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, where they practice Theravadan Buddhism, where they're very interested in getting themselves free of suffering. But in Mongolia, and originally China, Tibet, Korea, Bhutan, Japan, all Mahayana Buddhist countries where you're focused on ending your own suffering, continuing on a path to full awakening, full enlightenment, because then you're unlimited in helping others reach that place and helping others perfectly. So that's Mahayana, greater vehicle Buddhism of those countries, like that, which is now spread throughout the United States and Western countries, Europe, Australia, like that, due to the Tibetan, especially the Tibetan tradition, due to the Tibetans being exiled from their country in the 50s when they were invaded by the communist Chinese. So one advantage of that is it forced Tibetan Buddhism out of a very high Himalayan region where it was really like a fortress and not many people got in or out and things like that to understand what they were practicing. So that gives you a little picture of where it's come from, where the history in Buddhism like that. Any questions on that or any comments? So we also try to live according to Buddhist, they say, is it a religion? I see it as a spirituality, as a way of life, but I also see many religions like that. What makes something a religion? And I ask people, what do you mean religion? What do you mean by that? Like, what does it separate? For me to do something religiously means you have a conviction about it. So there are Catholics I know and Christians I know that it's their way of life as well. I know Jews, it's a way of life for them. Muslims as well. So it just depends on how you decide to practice. For me, they're just terms, religion, spirituality, like that. So some of the ways we choose to live is by what we call the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes things like, right communication, because of course you want to try to communicate well, right livelihood, not being a butcher or an arms dealer would, according to Buddhism, not be a great livelihood because you're harming others, or being a drug dealer, like that. Right thought, what's the position of your mind, things like that. And so we kind of take ourselves through things leading us to right concentration, right mindfulness, that is a type of concentration. And so the Noble Eightfold Path, you can go through the different ones which we've mentioned before in the couple sessions that we've had, like that. Beautiful path, like that. And it kind of rights you, it kind of sets you already on an erect, balanced posture of life, I think. When you want to consult back and you're upset about something and somebody's made you angry and you're about to open your mouth, and hopefully, we have that wonderful saying in our culture, count to 10. And if you can insert a pause, then I might reconnect myself with right communication and say, is that what I'm about to practice right now? Or am I negatively reacting? So mindfulness, which comes from right mindfulness, which helps us develop right concentration, but mindfulness is a big hot word right now. And everybody wants mindfulness courses, and it kind of caught on, which is great. Mindfulness is not necessarily Buddhist, mindfulness courses, but what they do lend you tremendously is the ability to just notice what's going on in your mind at any given time. And I think that helps because it can help you refrain and restrain yourself, body, speech, and mind, from negative responses when we're not watching our mind and you just want to react, which is a lot of how a lot of our country is operating. So it doesn't mean we have to do it like they do it. That's why Buddhist groups are great, because we're trying to, again, introduce something that some people may feel is healthier, leads me to be happier, more peaceful. Sounds great. And a lot of these things, I have to say, are being taught by other religions as well. The essence of, I think, all religions, for the most part, most of the big ones on the planet, is kindness. They really want, ultimately they really want that. What happens is when we see it practiced in certain groups and saying, I'm declaring war on another group because of my religion, I'm not really sure that that's what the religion truly is saying. That's what a human, and human nature suffers delusion, meaning confusion. So when a human gets a hold of it, sometimes they'll say, well, this is what I need or I want. Okay, so the I is in there as opposed to me considering others, like that. When I consider myself alone, sometimes I'm not necessarily being all that kind when I'm focused just on myself. Like that. Making sense?
Yes.
Everybody with me? Okay, great. So let me go into a bit of this prayer. We can read. I want to read the first 4 verses. For those of you that have been around for the ride of the last 2 sessions, this is the foundation of all good qualities, and we would call this one of our fundamental Lam Rim prayers. Okay, so the Lam Rim, and let me just explain a little further with Buddhism. When Buddhism spread out into all these different countries, it molted into the culture of those countries, meaning the Dharma and the essence of the Dharma itself did not change, but it had to adapt based on those cultures. So when it went to Tibet, it became maroon robes. If you go to Thailand, they have gold robes or brownish robes. In Burma, also slightly different colored robes. If you go to Japan, they wear different color, like that. There's some Chinese Buddhist groups in Taiwan, and they sometimes, I've seen them in like gray pajamas, male, female. So it's different according to those cultures. The reason this became maroon is in Tibet, in ancient Tibet, maroon was the poorest color dye for clothing. So it's associated with poverty and renunciation, which as a monastic, you're going to try to lead a simple life. I mean, if you're becoming a monastic to be worried about your hair and shoes and stuff, I think maybe think again, okay? So it's associated with that. Also, they adopted a little bit more levels of clothes because it's very cold in Tibet. So they need a little bit more than just a light little saffron robe, like that. And you can also have different weights of robes. I have my lighter one right now because it's in Florida. They also have different cultural things that adapted, and I think right now, with us being in the United States, but some of you are from Mexico, some of you are from Argentina, and other South American countries, it will adapt to the country that it goes to. And as a joke, Lama Yeshe used to say to the monks and nuns that were Westerners, he said, yeah, you make it in your own country one day, you make your own uniform. So probably I've mentioned this before, in the States, I think we should make our own uniform at some point, and probably it will have some denim in it, because that's part of our culture, and I think it would be appropriate to some degree, like that. So certain things will adapt, like we don't serve salted butter tea at our pujas and our rituals. That's a refreshment they have in Tibet. It's a very high elevation. The Tibetan road is 13,000 feet, generally 11 to 13,000 feet. So they need something that's going to put meat on their bones, as they say. So they drink this salted butter tea. The first time I had it, I nearly vomited. Okay, it's like soup. It's not like tea. It's more like a soup. But the people, some of them are so poor, but they were so thrilled. And then what's honored for them is they will take their rancid butter and they'll slather a big heap of it right on the top of your bowl of this salty liquid. And I was like, and now I have to drink this? Like why not just inject peanut butter into my arteries right now, okay? But I learned to drink it, and some of it I learned to like it. But at our rituals, we're going to serve apple juice and something else that fits our culture, like that. So it is interesting how things adapted. So Buddhism adapted. Buddhism was also in Pakistan, Afghanistan, countries like that. That there's evidence of statues, and it was incredibly rich, and then it kind of halted, and then it got driven back, and then, and so now, but there's a lot of countries, and now it is growing into the West and things like that. So Lama Tsongkhapa then, in Tibetan tradition, there's 4 sects that arose. The Nyingma or Nyingmapa, the old ones, the Kagyu or Kagyupa, the Sakya or Sakyapa, and our tradition is the Gelug or Gelugpa, founded by a formidable character named Lama Tsongkhapa, and he was really a Buddhist saint and the founder of our tradition, living from 1347 to 1419. And he was extraordinary, genius. He did every practice 10 times over, was a great scholar, wrote commentaries and synthesis of original discourses of the Buddha that had been, the most famous one that had been taken by a lama in the not exactly sure the century. I'm going to say like Lama Atisha lived in maybe the 8th or 10th century and wrote a famous text called A Lamp for the Path. A Lamp for the Path. It's kind of cool when you really think about the titles, because a lamp for the path, it's like we need illumination to be able to see the path. And often we're in darkness. So you don't see, and we're flailing around trying to find our way. Okay? So when you have a lamp, you know, somebody holds up a lamp and you go, oh, okay. So I kind of sometimes think of Lama Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama means teacher. But I see them as kind of holding a torch, a lamp. I mean, now you can say something electric, and kind of saying like, over here. You know, this is the path over here. And meanwhile, we get lost. We're over behind the curtain, and then we get distracted. And we say, I know, but I know the path is there, but I just kind of need to watch this TV show tonight, right? Just need to go over here. And now I need, it's over. Oh, that retreat's happening. Well, I don't really feel like going. I have the time. I have the money, but nah, I don't feel like it. Yeah. So this is how we tend to go over here. So they keep leading us back. So Lama Atisha wrote A Lamp for the Path, and Lama Tsongkhapa centuries later took it and synthesized it and made it into what's called the Lam Rim. Lam means path. Rim means steps. Steps on the path. So it's a gradual path. Sometimes they call it the graduated path to enlightenment. So it's gradual, it's steps, it's a process is what it means. And what he includes in the Lam Rim are topics such as finding a spiritual teacher and devoting to them properly, appreciating your human rebirth and understanding the advantages of it and using it wisely, understanding that this particular rebirth is quickly falling away and we're soon going to die. So death and impermanence. And then understanding that can make us nervous, so use that as a motivator for practice to ultimately take refuge, which they say is the sacred door through which the teachings are entered. And then once you take refuge and kind of, in a sense, become a Buddhist in your heart, is then you want to learn the proper conduct. And we have our own 10 commandments, like that. Then you go into, and that would be all of what I would call the scope according to a person's motivation with the lower scope motivation, where they're very afraid that things will be worse when they die, and that motivates them to practice. So all those topics would be under that. When you move into a motivation built on that, where you say, well, I am terrified of what will come next, but I also realize that the current situation I'm in is unsatisfactory. There's a lot of suffering. So what I really like to do is bring about an end to that suffering for myself. So when you reach that place, the medium scope motivation deals with all the different kinds of suffering, and that there's an end to the suffering. And you look at how the suffering cycle, samsara, gets created. And then build on that motivation, you really realize, it would be great to end my own suffering, but all these other beings are suffering. So can I really sleep at night and be content and be really happy if I know these other people are suffering? So what if I really awaken that bodhicitta heart, the mind that wants to consider others more than itself? And what if I fully wake up and become a Buddha? Then I'm unlimited in helping all of them. So that takes you through the 3 scopes motivation of the Lam Rim according to Lama Tsongkhapa. So the foundation of all good qualities is what we would call one of our Lam Rim prayers, and it takes you through that entire path. So what I'd like to do is read the first 4 stanzas together, and then I'm going to comment a bit on those. So anyone who'd like to join in, feel free. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and venerable Guru. Correct devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again, please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities, and accomplish all virtuous deeds. So I want to focus tonight on stanza 2, 3, and 4. Number 1, we're going to probably do in our last session about Guru devotion. But number 2, what are they talking about in number 2? What's the topic they're talking about? Anybody?
Precious human rebirth.
Precious human rebirth, thank you. Precious human rebirth is technically the beginning of the Lam Rim. What is it? So precious human rebirth, sometimes called perfect human rebirth. Okay, let's look at what this is. Okay, technically there's 18 situations that make up a precious or perfect human rebirth. 8 freedoms and 10 endowments or richnesses. So there's 8 situations you are free from, and there's 10 situations you have. 5 are environmental and 5 are personal. But sometimes I just like to glean the incredible privilege and advantages we have of our life. Okay, but let's look at a few. In fact, I should give you, I'm not going to remember them all. Okay, 8 freedoms. 4 of them relate to the cycle of the different realms. Oops. So 4 of them are that we are free from being, and Buddhism does have lower realms of existence, and this tends to scare people. Okay, it is not meant to scare you, it is meant to motivate you. Okay? And we can talk a little bit also about reincarnation tonight if you like, or in the next sessions as well. Buddhism does have a belief in reincarnation, and I can go a little bit more into that if you'd like, but because of that nature of reincarnation, we've had many, countless previous lives, okay? And there will be other lives, our mind will go on into other forms. But because we've had countless previous lives, you have been all kinds of things before, and you've been through all these realms. So sometimes when I get nervous about something, or I'll think, I'm definitely going back, definitely going to hell, I think, well, I've survived it before. You know, I've made it through before. The problem with these realms is we don't remember being there. So we get lazy now. And we go, well, we have every perfect situation in practice now. We don't really use it. Okay, so we are free from being in a hell realm. The Buddhist hell realms, I'll just give you a quick thing. Some of them are similar to Catholic hell realms where you are burning forever. Okay, but I want to just clarify one word, forever. In Buddhism, you don't burn forever. Okay? You're only in that hell realm until you exhaust the causes that got you into it. Buddhism is all about cause and result. Meaning the only reason you get into a hell realm is something in your mind caused you to create a situation of immense suffering for others that creates sadistic killing, creates a cause for you to take rebirth in a hell realm. Something like that. Immense suffering on others causes you, Buddhism says, to take rebirth in a hell realm. But Buddhism has a variety of hells. Okay, so you don't get bored. Okay? We have cold hells where you're freezing cold. And we have hells, you know, I can go on and on. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on it. But the main part is, you, in the suffering you go through in the hell realm, you're exhausting and purifying the karma that got you there. And eventually, you clean it all out, and you move into a better realm with less suffering. So you're not there forever. You don't stay there forever. Okay, you can move into the next realm up. Preta, in Sanskrit, Preta, or hungry ghost. Hungry ghost, sometimes called craving spirit, is a realm that is consumed with immense hunger and thirst. What gets you into this realm is intense grasping and desire, and never being satisfied. We know some people like this, right? And we know some people, they appear to be human, but you know some people, it's never good enough. Whatever happens, they're never satisfied, never good enough. They need more, they have something, is this, I need this now, there's like that. So that can create, again, none of this is surefire because karma is very intricate, which we're going to talk about in another course, another night. We might get to some of it tonight. It's very intricate, and a lot of it's based on your motivation. So a lot of times we have very good motivation and we mess up, so that's going to flavor the karma. It's not necessarily all bad like that. And often we have mixed karma. Okay. So the Preta realm is consumed with this hunger and thirst, and basically these beings suffer tremendously. They don't have the karma. If I hold this up as a human and people say, oh, it looks like a clear glass of water, a Preta would see pus and blood. That's what their karma allows them to see. As a human, we see water. Does anyone else see anything different in here? Just curious if anyone sees ambrosia, because that's what the God realm would see. That's a higher realm, ambrosia. Okay, so it's interesting to think about, and what is interesting right here is you can watch and notice just in our ordinary human existence right now, isn't it interesting how all of us have different perceptions of things? Isn't it true? Right? If I say, mango to you, how many of you like mangoes? Okay, well that doesn't really count. Everybody likes mangoes. How many of you like, I'm trying to think of, how many of you like kale? Okay, not everybody raised their hand. Okay, right? So is it from the kale side? No, it's from our mind side. I'm not a real fan of tomatoes. But I know people that love tomatoes, and they say to me, what do you mean you don't like tomatoes? And I'm like, I just don't really, right? I mean, I eat them sometimes, but, right? It's from our mind. Our minds have different seeds in them. Isn't that interesting? So you also have different opinions about people. And some people are like, I hate him, and you're like, I never had a problem with the guy. So interesting like that. So this is also the different realms, where a hell realm is going to see it like this, a Preta realm will see pus and blood, a human will see water, a God will see ambrosia. So it's something to think about, is what is my mind telling me when I'm confronted with something or seeing something? Is my mind giving me the whole story? Okay, on one level, it's giving you a valid perception based on being a human, but a human being has limited consciousness. So you're not seeing the whole story. So I love that when I have a confrontation or I have a disagreement with someone, and then sometimes you see them walk away, or you see somebody looking at you, somebody you don't like, and they look over and you start a whole drama in your mind. They hate me, and they just think that I'm doing this, and now they think that I'm that, and you have no idea what's really going on. And so often our story's wrong. So it's very helpful for me to diffuse the story, to think, I don't know if my story is totally accurate. I'm having a valid perception right now. I saw the person look over at me. I saw them have a kind of negative look. Okay? But hasn't that happened to you? And it has nothing to do with the person. You got the flu, you don't feel well. You're consumed with something about your husband. I gotta go home, I gotta do this, and you just glance over at somebody, but you're looking a little aggravated. So they take it personally. And here's the other little magical thing I wanted to tell you. They're not talking about you. Believe it or not, the world is not revolving around you. Isn't that startling? Really? It's not about me, right? It's interesting. Okay? But it is really interesting because it helps me really diffuse my stories. When I get something going about somebody, I go, oh, look at that. She's thinking that. She's, I'm like, no, let it go. So it's easier to pacify. Okay. So Preta realm, lower realm of existence. The next realm up, and these are all lower realms, is the animal realm. Now the animal realm is a realm we interact with. Okay, we have pets. You see animals, stories on TV, and you go to the sea and there's animals, and okay. So it's still a lower realm of existence, consumed with immense confusion and ignorance. Okay, now you may say, no, my dog is the smartest being on the planet. Right? And I know some of your dogs, and they're smart. Okay, but check out your dog's life for a moment. Right, you really have to analyze the animal realm. Most animals live in the sea, by the way. And think about the insect realm. Come on, you live in Florida, a lot of insects, okay? Look at their lives. First of all, they're busy working, generally animals, which could be hunting for food, building their colonies, setting up things. So they're either hunting and killing if they're carnivorous, or they're spending, like an elephant spends all of its day eating. In Africa, I've seen wild elephants. All their day is spent eating. That's how much they need to take care of their eating. That's all they do all day is eat. They're vegetarian elephants, but so you've got, they're eating, they're killing, they're being killed, they're being hunted, so they're feeding themselves, they're going to the bathroom, they're sleeping, or they're making other animals. That's the animal realm. Check it out. That's it. Now I know your dog may come over and, and look up at you with those eyes that only your dog can give you and wag his tail, and everything's great, but it's really limited, the knowledge of an animal. And the pets that we have are the peak of the animal realm, the very top of the animal realm. So if you get a service dog that's smart and trained, that's the top, where they're serving others. They get to serve others. It may not be consciously, but they actually are creating incredible imprints by serving somebody, and some of them do it incredibly intelligently. And I do know some really intelligent beings, I'll put it this way, that seem to get stuck in an animal body. I knew a dog, and I'm not kidding you, that had a 400-word vocabulary. I'm not kidding you. My friend, no intonation. You're like, "Scamp, go get my brush," and the dog would go in the room and bring back your hairbrush. The same intonation of, "Can you get my slippers? Can you get my shoe? Can you open the door?" Unbelievable. But it was in a dog's body. Somehow it came back covered in fur, low to the ground, but super intelligent for the animal realm. I don't know what was going on there. It was a little scary, but that's the animal realm. So do check out the animal realm. So so animal realm, what gets you into that is a lot of laziness, ignorance, confusion, where you're not interested in seeking a solution of finding out answers to stuff. You're kind of satisfied with, "I don't know, I don't care," like that. People say a lot of sleeping during the day, if you do not have a night job, can get you into like a dog realm or something, because that's what dogs do all day, right? What was George Carlin's joke about? "I wonder what a dog does on their day off," right? Can't lay around, that's their job, right? It was kind of cute. So animal, those are the three lower realms. Animal, Preta, hell realm. Okay, so we're trying to avoid that. And those are three of the situations, Precious Human Rebirth, we are free from those three things, and we're also free of a higher realm. These are four of the freedoms of the 8. We're free from being a god. There are 2 god realms. It's an upper realm, higher than humans. There is a pleasurable god realm that's like a hedonistic space, and there is a jealous god realm. The jealous gods are jealous of the pleasurable gods. The pleasurable gods have so much pleasure, there's no incentive to practice Dharma. So what they end up doing is using up a lot of positive energy, living in that realm. And then they usually end up taking a lower rebirth. They're not enlightened in a God realm. You're still part of cyclic existence. 4 of our 8 freedoms that make up a precious human rebirth are those. You're free of those 4 situations. You're also free of, let's see if I can remember them all. You're free of being, having defective faculties. So everybody can hear what I'm saying. You can get yourself to Dharma teachings, and you have some level of intelligence, where I have met people that a friend brought along to a teaching because they were mentally disabled, but the friend was like babysitting them, so they brought them to a teaching, but they couldn't understand anything. There was a mother in Solukhumbu in Nepal, and every year when I was at Laudo doing nungnes with them, these fasting retreats, all the Sherpas come to do these nungnes, and lay people come to do these 2.5-day fasting retreats, and she would bring her son, who is severely disabled because she's his caregiver. She had nobody to leave him with, and she would bring him, and he would just sit quietly in the Gompa with us, but he couldn't really participate because he didn't understand. So we're free from having defective faculties. That would be 5. We are free from living in what they say, a barbaric society. Now, on one level, and I've asked lamas this, I don't actually think we got that freedom, but on a harsher level, if you live in a country like Saudi Arabia, it's illegal to practice Dharma. So we don't have that situation, and that's considered barbaric. Like where they say you're not in a central land. And a central land means a country where you can freely practice Buddhism. There was a woman came to our centers once when I was in California. And so she wanted to get Mandala magazine, which is a magazine of our organization, and it was then sent in a clear wrapper. So she said, is there any way that you could get it here and mail it to me in a brown bag that they can't see because it's illegal in Saudi Arabia to get the magazine? Can you imagine? Right? So it's like that. So we're free from that situation, and we're free from, I think they'll say, at a time when a Buddha did not exist. Some of the freedoms are related to the endowments, and trying to think of another one. I'm going to check on my notes and I can give it to you last. I can't remember the specifics of. I wonder if I have it here. Probably. Anyway, I'll look later. So the freedoms, and then there's 10 endowments. 5 again environmental, 5 personal, and they're related to the. So you're endowed. You're a human. And we've kind of covered that because you're not in the other realms. You're a human, but you're a human at a time when a Buddha exists. Okay. Not only did a Buddha exist and somebody got enlightened in our cultural, historical context, but the Buddha taught how you get there. They taught the entire path. And that path is furthered, another endowment, it's furthered by, for instance, there's groups like this. There's people that help support these groups, like the people that are organizing. That think about every cushion and everything they want to do and every picture they hang up. So it's furthered by people like that. There's people like myself that have some people that help benefact me, where they, offer, every year they'll help me offer for my living expenses, for this, for me to get travel here, for me to do this, anything, to buy a pair of socks or something. There's people that help monks and nuns like that, which is incredible. So my commercial advertisement. Dun, da, da. Let me just explain. Our monks and nuns organization, I'll just take a moment. They asked me, I was a professional fundraiser in my last life, so it was the last life, I think, okay. But our IMI stands for the International Mahayana Institute, and that's actually a monks and nuns association for Westerners that ordained, that's part of FPMT, our organization. So they asked if I could raise some money, and I've got a few flyers, and you're welcome to take whatever. So there is a website, and you can just go to the website. What happens for Westerners that people aren't aware is we are not supported by the organization, by FPMT, and this was startling for people. If you are living at a center, which I've done for many years, running centers, having jobs at centers, and if they are a center that has housing, some of them do. It could be a simple room. I was running 2 retreat centers that had little cabins like that. As long as I had my job there, then they would give me housing and food. When I didn't want to do the job anymore, and Rinpoche actually told me when it was time to resign and do retreat and things, then they needed the housing often, and this happened for many monks and nuns around the planet. They need the housing for another person to come and fill the job. So it's very tricky. We don't in the United States have a monastery or nunnery for Westerners of our tradition of FPMT. Shervasti Abbey is in Washington State, run by the abbess Venerable Thupten Chudran. She's a close friend of mine, but basically the nuns that live there are disciples of her, and I'm not a disciple of hers. So for FPMT, we're very much wanting to start something, but a lot of monks and nuns right now, we have a nunnery in Australia, in Queensland. We have a monastery in Nalanda in southern France. There are nuns that live around there that are starting a nunnery. They're starting to try something in Italy, but it's few and far between, that's it. If you don't have visas for those countries or passports, sometimes you can't stay that long. So a lot of us are on our own, and it can be really challenging. So I just mentioned that, and you're welcome if you ever feel you want to do something. There's a website there, so thanks very much. So people support, people help. The centers, they help monks and nuns, and it's further. It's incredible endowments to have like that. There will come future times, eons, they say, and a Buddha may manifest, somebody may get enlightened, but they don't teach how they got there, right? Maitreya Buddha will be another Buddha in the future, and Maitreya will teach. Maitreya represents loving kindness. Maitreya will teach, but Maitreya will not teach Tantra, which is the quickest path. So right now, with Shakyamuni Buddha, who taught everything, we have every perfect opportunity to practice. Like that. So they mentioned, so those are some of the environmental situations. Personal endowments would be, I think personal mentions you're a human with sound faculties, which also relates to the freedom of not having distorted mental capacity. You're a human, I think, who has faith in the Dharma, is one of the personal endowments. And I think living at a time when a Buddha existed and things like that, I can't remember specifically all of them, but you get the gist of the 8 freedoms and 10 endowments. So what I also like to think about is they will mention the rarity of becoming a human. We kind of think, well, I got here. Some people say to me, oh, you're a nun, so no problem when you die. Doesn't mean that. You don't know what's in my mind, right? You know? So, and sometimes they'll say, people get interested, what was I in a past life? What will I be in a future life? I don't worry so much about the past, that's already done. But they say, if you want to know what you were in a past life, look at your body now. What kind of body did you get? If you'd like to know where you're headed, future life, look at your mind now. Like that. So we have every perfect situation to get it together right now. And it doesn't matter how old you are when you start. I know some very intent people that started practicing in their 60s and things like that. So we also talk about the rarity of the precious human rebirth. And they give these analogies in the Lam Rim. For instance, if you took a straight pin, you know, when you sew and you're pinning something, a little top, and you stuck it in honey, and then you took the straight pin, because you live in Florida, you have a lot of sand, and you stuck it in the sand. Okay, so the amount that sticks to the top of the straight pin compared to the sand all over the planet, the amount that sticks to the top of the pin is a precious human rebirth. So precious human rebirth means it's somebody who's met the Dharma. You're not just a human, but you're a human who's met the Dharma teachings and has a way out of their suffering. That's precious. Like that. Okay, so they give another analogy. The blind sea tortoise. The blind sea turtle. Well, this one drove me crazy. I was like, oh, I don't want to hear about it again. It didn't really resonate with me. The blind sea turtle. So this blind sea turtle comes up to get air on the surface of the sea once every 100 years. And on the surface of all the seas of the world, which you know how vast that is, there is a golden lifesaver floating. You know, one of these things that has a hole in the middle. Okay? Floating randomly on the seas of the world. Every 100 years, this blind sea turtle is going to surface to the top to get air. What are its chances of getting its head through the lifesaver, through the yoke? That's a precious human rebirth. That's how rare it is to get into this form that meets the Dharma and can practice the Dharma and has interest and intent and faith in studying and practicing Dharma. So I spent a lot of time trying to, in one retreat, I was in this retreat for about 7 months, trying to get my head around that blind sea turtle. Like in the Lama Room, I was kind of like, I never meditated on that, I had no interest in it. But somehow I kind of penetrated through by visualizing for a long time the seas of the world. Like, I love water, and I was just like, it is vast, the sea. And this turtle's going to come up once every 100 years, and you got this little thing floating. And somehow so what happens is if you're analytically meditating on the Lam Rim, which is what I was doing, I'm analyzing and saying, for it to get its head through that yoke, like, what are the chances? So what happens is intellectually, I know I have a precious human rebirth, but I don't feel it necessarily. So slowly through the course of the meditation, I would have these little grabby moments of like, whoa, this is pretty special. And then I would concentrate on that to deepen that experience so that it would be planted a little bit more strongly in my heart. Over and over you could go through that. You could think about the pin, and you pick it up and you go, that's all the grains of sand on top? That's not much, you know. Wow, I got here this time. You know, I'm on the pin. That's me. Great, I got it. You know, so you need to go over and over these meditations sometimes slowly. First, reading the text, you understand what you're meditating on, and slowly letting it sink deeper, like that precious human rebirth. So they talk about the rarity. And one time, I think I told this story before. I was teaching in Mexico. Okay, we have a number of centers all over Mexico. We have wonderful people. And the guy that was hosting me, the couple, he used to have a dive shop. Or something, they wanted to take me out on a boat snorkeling. And I was really like, it's okay, you know, but they really wanted me to go. They insisted. And so I went out, but I couldn't dive because I'm not licensed. So they were going to scuba dive, and I was a snorkel on the top of the water, and they told me that they tied a rope to my foot with one of these golden yokes, lifesaver, because so that the other boats wouldn't run me over, that they knew there was a person on the surface snorkeling. And that was a sign they'd see the lifesaver in case they didn't see me. So I said, yeah, no problem, great. So there I go off, and I love the water so much, so I'm snorkeling away and looking, and there's all kinds of cool things, and it was fantastic, right? And I'm snorkeling, and I'm under there, and what do I see in front of me coming up? Turtle. Big sea turtle. Right, and now it didn't look blind, okay, but all of a sudden I'm like, look, it's this, you know, I all of a sudden had this moment of like, I have a precious human rebirth, you know, and it didn't get its head through the lifesaver. I was watching, I'm like, because there's a lifesaver, could have easily, and I was like, no, didn't do it. So it's nice, but what's really nice about a precious human rebirth is to please spend, I do it every day, to please spend some time of your day appreciating, first of all, the good circumstances of your life. There are many. You know, all of us right now are in a room of privilege. Come on. I mean, I have so much privilege in my life. It's unbelievable. Just because I have, let me put it this way, white skin. Incredible, the advantages to me. I've had an amazing education. I have a wonderful, loving family. I have amazing friends. I have incredible teachers. I don't know what I can say. It's like, it goes on and on. I can go on and on. I have incredible, blessed life like that. So I appreciate it every day. But those are only circumstances of my life. The fact that I have food in the refrigerator, easily accessible, delicious food. I have shelter. I have such a decent house to live in, right? I have a wonderful, comfortable bed to sleep in. And we've had a very rough, cold winter up north. And I have a warm bed every night, like that, with heat. I can just turn up the heat if it's cold. You know, it's such a luxury, like that. So it's fantastic having these things. But then what about your own qualities? Do you ever appreciate your own qualities? Okay, this is not overly self-serving, especially if you have a good motivation. This is about battling low self-esteem. By appreciating every day you have good qualities. You do many things well. We're very quick to focus on what we mess up, right? Okay, it's not fair. You need to give equal airtime. So I spend time every day just noting, and sometimes I'll notice I messed up, and then I'll go, well, you know, I really had a good intention, you know, and I'll learn for the next time. But I'm not going to hang on to that negative stuff too much. Learn from it, move on. Try not to repeat the same mistake like that. But it's really essential. Make sense? Possible? Okay, that's your job until our next meeting. Please, but I do it every day. I think gratitude is, I'm so grateful. So I think just appreciating that is huge. Huge part of the path, like that. Okay. What does happen with this life is it is rapidly passing away. It is rapidly passing away. Many of you are quite aware of impermanence and change, for one. Impermanence and change. But a really great exercise is, for each of you, how do you respond to change? Pretty good? Resistant? Yeah, she's back there. Right? Little changes, some of us can adapt pretty well, it's easy. What happens if we practice really well with the little changes? you can be a bit better with bigger changes when they come. How will you respond with the death of a loved one? Like, let's say the death of a parent. You know, this is the natural order. We like parents to go before children. That's ideal. It doesn't always happen, but that would be great. You know, so things happen. Some of you have lost parents. Some of you may be caretaking elderly parents, and you look at, and sometimes your parent doesn't live to be 90. 90 is a pretty good life. If you get to 90, even if you get to 80, but sometimes not. They're taken at 54 years old or 60, and you feel like, wow. You know, so how will you deal with that? How are you going to deal with their death, or looking at it, maybe they're faced with a serious illness. You yourself may have been faced with a serious illness. How did you deal with it? Were your eyes open? Somewhat balanced? Certainly doing the measures you need to do, and certainly watching. Can we watch fear arise in our mind and deal with it with mindfulness? Meaning, I'm just noting that I'm scared right now. I'm just noticing that there's fear in my mind. I don't need it to propel me through every experience I'm having right now, but I'm just going to watch it for a while, and I'm going to layer some antidotes on it to help me deal with it a little bit better. And sometimes the most fundamental one is just breathing. Because life's uncomfortable in samsara. That's its nature. Discomfort is the nature of samsara. So to expect everything to be easy and perfect all the time is unrealistic and will cause you a lot of suffering. I know people, my niece, whom I adore, she's in her 20s. When she was 9, I remember I would visit from California. Now I live near her, and I would visit, and I was one night tucking her in or reading her a story, and she said something like, I just want everything to be the way it is right now. At 9. And I had this little thing in me of like, oh my God, you're gonna suffer. Like I just had this because I didn't think it was realistic to say like, oh well, it will be, or don't worry, everything's gonna be fine, because it's not realistic. So I think, look at how you deal with change now. Pretty good. Do you get upset if a friend cancels lunch plans? How do you feel about that? The yoga class is canceled. It's a different teacher. How's your mind with that? You might change jobs. Your boss is different. Your husband might want to move. Your kids get sick. How's your mind? How's your mind going, And we're pressed at times. Different things happen. So it's interesting. It's better to practice, if you're not good with change and impermanence, is to practice with little changes of noting this is samsara's nature. This is reality. Like that. And then you'll get more experience, so when you deal with bigger changes that come in. Also, it's very nice to do a meditation on impermanence, of just noting, sitting quietly and noting, first of all, the changes that blatantly are taking place in your body. So you might feel your stomach rumble. You're noticing you got a twitch in the back of your neck. You have an itch. You might notice a little heart flutter. Stay with that for a while. Oh yeah, there's all these changes in my body. Then go down to a level in your body that you're not noticing. Blood's going through your veins, you're not aware of that. Neurological activity. Digestive activity. Not aware of those kind of things. What about a molecular level of the body? It's always changing. Cells right now, they're coming into being, they're passing away, they're changing, they're molting, they're continual change in the body. So you stay with that. You take 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, and you can review, reflect on all the changes going through your mind, how the mind's changing every moment, changing. Every thought is made up of moments of mind, one after another, causing the next, over and over and over. So you spend a little time with body and mind, all the changes. It's nature. And then step out of the body and mind, externally. First in the room I'm in. Well, the curtains look like they're not changing, but we know molecularly they are. A physicist could tell you. Even the air in the room is changing every moment. Every time I breathe, I'm breathing in different air. Breathing in a different number of molecules. Exhaling a different level of air. The floor seems concrete, right? But it's also molecules moving around in a different configuration than the air, more slowly. That's why it solidifies like that. Everything's moving. Everything's changing. You can step outside the room. Cars are moving by. Trees are blowing. Lights are going on. Lights are going off. I mean, people are moving around. Everything changes. So you slowly, that's a nice meditation on impermanence you could try to help you moving through with change. The most dramatic change most of us will go through is our death. Most dramatic change will be this ultimate transition. And Buddhism deals with it in a very natural way. It is a natural part of life. It's a natural part of life. Some of you are noting your aging. I think it really hits people around 50. I don't know how many of you are at that age, but 50 is a big mile marker, I noticed for myself. Okay? Things were quite different with my body after 50. It was extraordinary. You know, I found skin in places I've never I was like, what is this? You know, what's going on here? Why is that down there when it should be up there? You know, what is happening there? Okay? It's natural. It's natural. We have a thing called gravity. And it is, sometimes I feel like it's sucking me into the earth, okay? It's a natural thing. I don't live on the moon. I don't live in a space station. This is where we live, right? So it's a natural course thing, and I see people completely tormented by the changing of their skin. The skin changes color, your hair changes color, the eyesight goes, your knees hurt. It's natural. It's just the way it is. If I'm going to be miserable about it, I will be miserable for the rest of my life. Right? Let's hope that our minds are gathering wisdom. That's a beautiful thing about aging. You're learning. Let's hope you're learning more and evolving more. That's fantastic. But the unfortunate thing is our planet seems to worship youth. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that the whole focus is things have to be fast-paced as far as the way we think, and everything should be young and tight and firm and supple, and it needs to have this kind of tone and this, texture. And, and why is that? When I've seen some beautiful old people with long white hair, and I think they're beautiful and a face full of wrinkles, and why is that not attractive? Because it's programming. It's this programming that we buy, we need to look like that, and you look so much better, really, why? Like that. If the mind's evolving and developing, that's interesting. So we talk about a 9-point death process, and then I'll stop and take some questions. In Buddhism, there's a famous 9-point death meditation that helps bring you a little closer to the death experience. Some of us wake up in the morning, and I do this in the morning, and I think, genuinely, this is my last day. I want to live the day like it's my last day. So I participate on a practical level, meaning it's not like, I'm not going to work today, it's my last day. What's my attitude? What I do is I like to look at, if this is my last day, what will my attitude be on my last day? I'd like to be peaceful, happy, kind. I'd like to be thinking of others, like to have a big open-hearted experience on my last day and sail off. Okay, so that's how I'm gonna try to be today. This is my last day. I do that right in the morning when I lie in bed and wake up. Waking thought. That's the easiest way to do death meditation. A second way is the 9-point death meditation, more traditional. The 9-point death meditation includes 3 roots with 3 reasonings under each root, and each of those reasonings will lead you to 3 resolutions. 3 resolutions. The 3 roots are, does anybody remember? Number 1. Anybody? Death is certain. Death is certain. The second root is the time of death is uncertain. The The time of death is uncertain. Third root, the only thing that benefits you at the death time is your Dharma practice, or say your spiritual practice. Let's look at the three reasonings under the first. Death is certain. Okay? Number one reasoning. So these are things you'd go over and over in a meditation to lead you to the conclusion, here, not here. Intellectually, we know we're going to die. You might not have that one yet. Okay, but as you get older, you get it. Okay, you know, like, okay, everybody dies, but I don't have it here. So this is to lead me to a more experiential realization where I'm like, wow, I am going to die. And then you start living your life a little differently. It motivates you to practice these meditations. They're not to cripple you with fear. It's to motivate me. I better get going. Okay, so the three reasonings under death is certain is everybody dies, number one. Meaning there's no power in the universe that will stop death from coming to you. Number two is every moment you're closer to death. It's inevitable, it's coming. Number three, we're in the middle actually in New York of the death and rebirth module right now, discovering Buddhism. Now you guys don't meet on Wednesday nights normally, do you? Okay, because
except for visiting teachers.
Okay, because that center, people asked them if they could live stream it, and I just thought, if you ever had, you know, because they are doing it weekly right now, and I led a couple of this, but anyway, it's something you can think about for the future, you know, if there's something happening. Every moment you're closer to death is number two. Number three is there's very little time to practice Dharma. Death is definitely coming. And you could go through, for instance, everybody dies. So in the meditation, you want to slowly go through all the different people you've heard of who've died. The smartest people on the planet, like Einstein, died. He did not figure out a way out of it. He died. Somebody walked on the moon, but they still died. Okay? The most powerful people on the planet that can create nuclear war, they die. You know, all the past presidents, you know, a lot of them have died, okay? And you go through the most creative people on the planet. Mozart, Beethoven, I mean, amazing musicians, composers like that. They died, they didn't figure out a way out of it. And what about Pope John Paul II? He died. He didn't figure out a way out of it. The Buddha died. So you think you're immune from this situation? Even the Buddha died. Okay, he may not have suffered the way we might suffer, but even he died. It's his famous last teaching, that all phenomena are subject to impermanence, and this is the last teaching of the Tathagata. That was his last teaching, and he passed away. Like that, okay? So everybody dies. You can review like that. The second part, that you're a moment closer to death, you can a little bit practice this through the day. We right now are another Monday closer to death, by the way. We are another evening closer to death. We're another January closer. Like that. You're another lunch closer, perhaps, after eating lunch today. Another car ride closer to death. I mean, every step you take, you could be like, you walk into the bathroom, I'm another step closer, I'm another step closer, I'm another step. Really helps to kind of keep it alive in the mind. And the third one, we have very little time to practice. Look at our lives we sleep about a third of our life. That's standard for most people. As she yawns in the back. I'm teasing you. So we sleep about a third of our life. How much time is spent working, getting an education, relationship stuff, raising children, buying food, thinking about food, creating food, shopping, all that kind of stuff, restaurants, blah, blah. What about shopping, clothing, adorning yourself? I mean, it's endless, isn't it? How much time in a day do you spend now? Some people I know 15 minutes, some people maybe an hour. Okay, so in a 75-year lifespan, they say an average practitioner will get about 5 years of Dharma practice in. How's that going to work with the mind? You only have 5 years of those imprints, and all 70 years of all kinds of other imprints. Something to think about. Okay? So these three reasonings, everybody dies, you're a moment closer to death, and there's very little time to practice Dharma, leads you to the resolution for this part. Resolution that death is certain is that I must practice Dharma. Second root, the time of death is uncertain, is harder to realize. We know we're going to die, we just think it will be when we're old. So we even say that with our language, when I'm old. So now I change it and I say, if I live to be old, because I don't know if I'll live to be old. Some people think I'm old now, okay? So, getting there. Okay, so this is harder to realize. The time of death is uncertain. This has three reasonings again. Number one, we live on a planet with an unfixed lifespan. So people die at all different ages, as you know. And you can reflect in the meditation, in a meditative, thing, of all the different ages that people died. The 2 funerals I went to last week, one person was 74, one was 15. And that's how it is. People die before they're even born, right? Kids can die people can die when they're older, people die all different kinds of ways, so that we know is unfixed. The second and third parts are related. The second part is that there's many more situations that are actually contributing to your death than keeping you alive. There are natural disasters, environmental toxins, food poisoning. You can go into the hospital for something minor, and you can get something major and die, get an infection and die. Violence, bacterial infections, viral infections. I mean, there's so many things that really are out there that can harm. Right now, this flu that's going around is nasty, and it has killed some people. I think some people that are much more, a very degenerated immune system, it's really been very difficult. So the last one is the body's fragile. Again, so it's not that, that the car materials, when you're in an accident, this is much more delicate than all the materials the car is made of, based on the force of the car and things like that. It's not the earthquake that really kills you, it's the building that falls down on your head, in an earthquake, because the body's very delicate. So these you slowly reflect on, one at a time, like that, and you can take as long as you want with each point. Like, it's not to do all 9 points in one meditation, it's very long. Take one section and slowly go through 10 minutes, 20 minutes, like that. If you want, just take one point and go through. Every moment I'm closer to that. Sometimes I think with that one, I got dropped out of an airplane. That was my birth, and I don't have a parachute. So every moment I'm falling towards earth. When I hit earth, that'll be it. That's death. I'm going to die. But every moment I'm falling through space without a parachute, this is my life right now. That's what it's like. So the second point, time of death is uncertain, leads you to a resolution. Not only must I practice Dharma, I must practice Dharma now. The emphasis on the now. The last part is the easiest to realize, is nothing really benefits you at the death time other than your spiritual practice. This talks about your possessions and I call it like position and possessions, your things, your stuff is of no help to you. Your money and possessions. Now, your money may make you more comfortable when you're dying. You might have the hospital bed you want, in the room you want, and be able to stay at home and have round-the-clock care. Fantastic. Great, but I've seen people like that dying with every creature comfort they could have and the mind not prepared, and they're miserable. So that doesn't really do it, necessarily. I've seen some really poor people, not much happening, and Rinpoche's mother passed away in India during a big teaching with the Dalai Lama in like a tent, basically. Well, it was Rinpoche's mother. She was a special person, okay, but not an ordinary person, but it was quite eye-opening for me. It was many years ago. So, I've seen people clinging on to possessions at the end. You know, I don't want my son to get the house. I don't want I don't want her to have the pearls. I don't, you know. It's like, really? Is that what you're going to be worried about? Second part is friends and family. Okay, this is a little bit radical. Are of no help to you. Let's think about it. Okay, now, if you have a Dharma group, few people that know your practices, Rinpoche's advised us sometimes to sit around somebody's bed the last few days of their life, and we've done their practices out loud. They can hear. It's very hard to focus at that time. Is your practice really rooted in you that you'll know exactly what you're to do? So we sit around their beds. People do this of any persuasion. I know Catholics that have gone into a devout Catholic's room and recited prayers. Jews do it for people. Muslims do it. You know, you'd sit around. Can people do that with composure and show up regularly to do those practices that you want done for you? And do they know your practices? And is that going to be helpful? As opposed to what I have seen at times, because I've done a lot of hospice work, I've seen relatives crying over the person. Don't leave me. I can't live without you. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've seen people arguing in the room, fighting over the person's belongings, and it disturbs the person because they can hear. I've seen all kinds of strange situations with friends and family around people when they're dying. But there is humor in death. There is humor, okay? So I just saw, and one of my closest friends from university is a real New Yorker, but he now lives in LA because of his son. They live out there, and the mother of his son is out there and stuff. So he's just a love, this guy, and his brother died of AIDS in the 80s in New York City. His brother was one of the early victims that went of AIDS, and his brother was was a theater critic and a very kind of funny guy with, you know, and so he got AIDS, and the parents were divorced, and they had remarried and had other families. There's a big extended family. The parents didn't know he was gay. So when he told them he has this disease that is killing him is when they found out he was gay. So the parents not only are alarmed that he's gay, but now he's dying. So at the very end, he's in the hospital in a semi-coma and hasn't really, you know, done much for a couple of days or said anything. And the whole family comes to the hospital bed around him. Now the mother is a housewife from Long Island, New York. I don't know if you're familiar with Long Island, but they speak differently up there. She had a heavy accent. Long Island, you know, very strong accent from Long Island. And he had asked her, she was a wonderful, you know, traditional housewife up there, but he wanted her to read some new age books about death and dying, like Stephen Levine books like Who Dies and things that talk about, you know, you're really not this body and go to the light and all these kind of things. And he really wanted her to read these books. And these were a bit of a stretch for her. But bless her heart, she read them for her son, because he said, Mom, I want you to know what to do in the end for me. But now he's in a coma. So at the end, the whole family's there. My friend told me the story, and she leans into him, right over him, like face to face. And she says, Stephen, go to the light. Go to the light. This really heavy New York accent, this strong, you know. And unbelievably, he opens his eyes and lifts up his head a little, and he says, I'm trying, Mom. I'm trying. So sometimes it happens like that, okay? But think about friends and family. How helpful will they be, right? Like often they're not that helpful, and we're attached to them. If we're dying, you're hanging on, and they're attached to us, and as a result, because they're attached to us, we can't go. And I've seen all kinds of different stories of people asking somebody, can you leave because I need to die? And don't beat yourself up if you're on a vigil with somebody who's passing away and you are exhausted and you decide to go to the hospital cafeteria to have a cup of coffee, and you come back and they passed away. They may have been waiting for you to leave. That happens many, many times. I usually meet people, they either want everybody in the room or they don't want anybody in the room. Like that. So and people come back and they beat themselves up that I wasn't there. It was the one moment I left and I wasn't there, and I'm like, that may have been just what they were waiting for. Like that. So friends and family, they say, are really of no help unless they can help with the practice. They do not do the death experience with you. It's yours alone. The third one is your body is of no help, because it's the thing basically is the reason often it's not supporting your life. anymore. So this leads you to a resolution, these three reasonings. The last one is, I must practice Dharma. I must practice Dharma now, and I must practice it well. The emphasis on the well, so that I have a rich, consistent Dharma practice that will sustain me at the death time. Any questions? Comments?
You're so fantastic. That's my comment. It's fantastic. Every time. It's beautiful.
I'm glad it's helpful. No, if there's something helpful.
So beautiful. Everything that you said is...
And truly, if there is something helpful, because I am just giving information according to this tradition, please, if there's something helpful I've said, you have to make it your experience, so analyze it. Please investigate thoroughly what I'm saying. Don't just accept, because I got a bald head and I'm in maroon robes. Analyze, check it out. How does this relate to my life? Is this going to make my life happier? Is this really the way it is? You have to check. That's what I liked about Buddhism. They said, you have to do the work. Nobody can make you Buddhist. Nobody can make you believe this. I'm not interested in that. You have to work. If something rings for you, something makes you happier, something you go, that's true. That's going to lead me to this. That's your path. And if it doesn't work for you and you're not finding it, please find something else. Doesn't bother me in the least like that.
I have something to say about when you're talking, or Rinpoche or someone is talking about hell realms. Because of my Catholic background, it's always a place until it was clear to me that it was a state of mind, that you can even be here and your state of mind is in hell. So, for Camila, that it's here, I wanted to say that I understood that it's a state of mind. It's not like...
Yes, I mean, I've asked this to lamas, and they say there's a place.
Ah, there is.
And they say, I mean, I've even heard in some Buddhist teaching, it's like, what do they say? They use this word yojanas, or, and they're like levels. And it's below, like, the stupa in Bodh Gaya. But, like, inside the earth's core, there's this place. Now, I don't know if I honestly believe that, but I have heard teachings like that.
Okay.
To me, it does, and some lamas said, no, it's not just a state of mind, but to me, sometimes it seems that way because there was a story I heard where they took a lama that was an exorcist, and he was one of my teachers, Geshe Lama Konchok. He's passed away. But he was visiting a student that was in a mental institution in Germany. And they walked him through a ward, and it was a ward with many people to get to the student's room. And when he was in the ward, he saw spirits attached to people that were considered crazy. But there was a guy on the edge of his bed freezing to death, wrapped in heavy blankets in a room temperature that was like this. And the guy was like, blue lips, and so obviously in his mind it was like a cold hell realm that he was. So some lamas say, yeah, it seems like that, and because it is the karmic seeds in your mind here that create the cause for that. So I could have one more exhalation, and my next inhalation, and I look down and there's a furry paw here where my arm was, I don't, it could be, so that's my mind in a sense, but they're saying you're actually going to live as a being in that place, is what they're saying, that you manifest in that place. Okay. That's a good question, yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's somewhat debatable, but usually I hear there is some sort of place.
Okay.
Like that. And mainly, let's just hope we don't have to go there ever again, like that.
Okay. Thank you. I never heard it in the Buddhist tradition, so
Yeah.
I thought it was there.
Yes. Is everybody okay? Because I know talking about the hell realms and talking about death, it can be a little sobering. So, and you might be a little like, things pop up with that and bubble up. So it's okay to be a little somber tonight and just relax. The nice thing is we're not dead, and we have great lives that we can continue to pursue this path or something like that, and really have incredible meaning in our lives. So I really in closing, would like to just dedicate in that way. And absolutely really invest our time and energy as much as we can. I'd like to dedicate in this way that we can create rich and really meaningful practices that are going to help us be clear in our minds, more open in our hearts, happier, more peaceful, and can we reach a place where we're unlimited in sharing all of those qualities with all other beings. So we're going to turn back to our prayer page and we dedicate with some closing dedication prayers. So if you turn to the dedication prayers on the second page, we're going to read these 2 prayers in English. And feel free to join in if you'd like. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. And the long life, the short long life prayers for our teachers. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrei Sig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And we'll go to B for the long life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the 3 sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And for Osalhita, Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far-distant land, we make this request. Lama, please, please live long. Thank you very, very much.